Holladay from the BYU Center for Animation. We're grateful for his time coming to share with us some things about their program and some insights that they have learned as they've gone through their design processes over the years. So if you'll please join me in welcoming Seth to our seminar today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. My voice isn't super loud, so if you can't hear, feel free to move up a little bit. Also, in this kind of setting, it seems like if I'm rolling along and you have a question, you can probably just go ahead and ask me a question during the presentation. I can hopefully just kind of adapt to what questions you have. So yeah, I'm Seth Holladay. I've actually been teaching in the animation program for 10 years now. And I know a few people from here. I've actually, I know, let's see, Dr. Rich and Dr. McDonald and Dr. West. I've met a few of your faculty, been talking with them since I've been here. So really, you have a really good faculty and program here going on, so it's fun to get to talk to you. I feel like you're in design, we're in design, we're kind of cousins here, so this, there's a lot of, design is hard, and so hopefully we kind of understand each other a little bit about what's involved, no matter where you're designing from. So the question at hand here is just what's going on in the animation program, but along with that, yeah, like Dr. McDonald was saying, I want to give some insights as far as maybe some of the things we've learned along the way as we're doing that. But first, it's mostly what are we up to now. I do want to emphasize, I actually changed the title. I don't know if you even saw the title at the top, but it's I said how to make successful films and games. And I actually wanted to change the theme a little bit to how we're trying to make films that are great and good. Great meaning hopefully there's some excellence to it, and good in the fact that we're here at BYU and we have an opportunity to make a difference here, hopefully for good. And we also know that the Lord has some hand in what we're doing here. And no matter where we're at in life, if we're seeking the Lord's help, He's got a hand in it. So just some of what's going on. First of all, do you mind if I turn off this light? Better you see the slides than me. So this is just photos that we recently had. So some of what we're doing, every year we make a film, a short film animation, and we make a game. And this was a film, essentially we made a film last year. I think we finished a year ago, October, called Grendel. And in May or June, we applied to the Academy Awards, and then finally they got back to us in like September, and then in October we learned that we had won an Academy Award. And so these are a couple of pictures from the Academy Award that we won for the film Grendel that hopefully I'll show you later. But a pretty good feat. I mean, a lot of people have heard of the Academy Awards. They actually said they had over 1,600 applicants and they had 15 winners. And so we were one of the winners. And then out of those winners, they have different categories, and they choose a bronze, a silver, and a gold, kind of like the Olympics. And we don't know what we get. We knew we won, but we don't know which level we got until we got to the Academy Awards. And so we go there. They actually present the awards to the students and their teams in the Academy Theater where they have the Academy Awards. So it was kind of a fun deal for the students to go and dress up. This is Kaylee McCollum. She was the director on the film Grendel, so she was a student here, directed it. And as she was giving her speech, she said, hey, anyone on the team who's here, come on up. And luckily the security guards didn't jump them all the way up because they seemed really tight there. But anyway, they all came up and it was a good experience for them. And then these two guys here, they actually presented the award. That's Chris Miller and
Phil Lord?
Yeah, Phil Lord. Yeah, so what are they known for?
A whole bunch of stuff. So they were, so they did things like, so they worked on either as producers or directors or writers or whatever on movies like the Lego Movie, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, 21 and 22 Jump Street, and lots of others.
Yeah, so if you're a fan, I'm a fan of some of those movies. If you're a fan of any of those movies, that's them. So they brought some big names to present it. Anyway, they made it fun for the students, and they get this big award, which is neat. So just a few other numbers about our program. We've been doing this for about 16 years, and over the 16 years, we've won 5 Student Academy Awards over the years, about once every 4 years, 3 or 4 years. And then we have also 18 student Emmys. So we've won a fair number of awards in that, amongst a bunch of other things, but those are kind of the big leagues competitions that we put into. So the other thing is, though, that we don't, so about 5 years ago, we've been making films for about 10 years, and we had some students that would get jobs in video game industry as well, because they're related, a lot of the skills are related. But then a lot of the video game companies said, no, we need more experience. We love your students, but we want them to come out and have experience actually making games. So we're like, well, we're already strapped for time making films, and like we're just barely keeping our heads above water, but why don't we make games? Which is kind of dangerous because you don't want to stretch yourself thin. But we found that there's a lot of overlap and there was a big need out there. So we're like, well, let's try to make games. So we started making one game a year as well. So each year the senior class, they get to decide, do they work on a film or do they work on a game? And over the years, we've actually had a fair amount of success at that. So this is a group of students who went to E3. E3 is, has anyone heard of E3? Okay, a few of you, yeah. It's a big exhibition floor thing, the biggest that they have in the game industry. And they actually, it's huge. They have over 70,000 people who go to this conference. And then they started having these competitions for schools. They invited over 300 schools to apply. That's undergraduate, graduate schools. We've applied our game every year, and this was for one of our games called Knockback. Sorry, this was for a game called Beatboxers. They only accept 5 finalists out of over 300 people, schools, and so they went there, and then they get to spend 3 days on the floor showing off their game. They said the floor space was worth about $100,000 that they were sitting on. So a fairly big deal. Got to run into a lot of people, meet a lot of people there. Here's actually a little time-lapse video of someone took of the line getting into E3 in the morning. And this wasn't, this is just people who got in line in the morning, and then people keep coming through all the day. So I think it was taken at once every 5 seconds or 10 seconds or something like that. Anyway, it's this giant line. Anyway, it's this huge thing. So it was, again, kind of fun for our students to make a game. They spend a year on the game. Is that time even going to be worth it at all? But they just put a lot of time and effort in it, and so they ended up going to E3. Garrett Egan's actually helped out on some of these games, either working on them or kind of advising on them. So that's a big deal here. So just a few more numbers. Of the 6 years that we've applied, we got in 4 times to E3. That's more than any other school except for Savannah Arts of College of Design, I think. So we've actually also been to another big competition twice at Game Developers Conference, which is another huge conference. We won one of them. One of them, it was us versus the 30 top game programs in the nation. They only invite the top game programs. A lot of them are graduate degrees again. And we won one of those. We got into one of those, and then we won one of them. So it's kind of a fun deal. This is just a lot of what we're doing. We spend a lot of time and focus on these projects. So is this all about the awards, I guess, is part of the question, and what's involved in all of this? Why do we do this? So we actually have some program goals. And it's actually pretty easy to figure out what are the goals of our program. But I think it's a little deeper than this. Every program is going to have more goals than this. But essentially a lot of what it comes down to is the mission of Brigham Young University. Because we're here, we have the advantage to be here. Why not take advantage of what we've got? And so they're really interested in assisting individuals in their quest for perfection in internal life. And that's students, of course, but also faculty and staff, anyone involved here. We're trying to help out. We're all helping each other out. But they say we want to provide a period of intensive learning in a stimulating setting where commitment to excellence is expected and full realization of human potential is pursued. From what I've seen, even in this program as well, similar goals. A commitment to excellence. So the idea there is that A, we want to bring good to people around us. We want to bring good to the world. And we also just really want to focus in on doing something great. It's so easy to get scattered, like I'm interested in this, and I'm interested in this, and I'm interested in this. I don't know if you've ever had that happen to you. I certainly have, but anyway. That's part of what we try to help, is not only do fun, interesting projects, but how do we focus in and try to do some excellent things, and then do it with an intent to make a good impact on the world. And then we also get into spiritually strengthening as well as intellectually enlarging, character building. Then that goes on to the lifelong learning and service, enter to learn, go forth to serve. So these are all very much goals that we have. Sometimes the projects that we do, they're just fun, entertaining things, and that's fine, and those reach certain audiences, and other things we do are more serious and involved. Those reach other audiences. But this is where, again, we want to focus on products that are great and good. And another thing that we've learned as we're trying to do this, I was actually reading the Book of Mormon just this morning, and you hear the theme throughout the Book of Mormon a lot, but when the Nephites were heeding the word of the Lord, a lot of things were going well for them. They had a lot of good, and that doesn't mean things always go perfect. But we found that, especially in an institution like this, where that could be a huge part of it, that's one advantage that we have here, is to really try to heed the Lord as we're learning good things. And then I'm going to give you some insights into what we do and what we've learned, but more than anything, those insights only get you so far, and then dependence on the Lord from there. So just as we're going along, that's kind of an overarching theme that we'll get back to later. So along with these goals, is it having an impact? So this is a picture, this guy right here is Dan Lemon. He won an Academy Award, I think a year ago, for the movie Jungle Book. So they took the Disney movie Jungle Book and they made it into the quote-unquote live-action film, where it all looked realistic. And there was a lot of computer graphics in there. In a cool film, they actually took Jungle Book and tried to just insert a few more themes into it. Anyway, he was a big part in the visual effects of that film. We've had, and these are all alumni that we've had come out. We've got the Mustard Brothers, who are the creative heads now at Epic Games. Hiram Osmond, the head of animation at Disney, and there's actually another member of the LDS Church who is one of the story people at Disney. And one or both of them served missions in the Pacific, and then they were both working on Moana. So he was over all the animation in Moana, and they got to bring a lot of the culture stuff to that story. We've got Shading Leaves at Pixar. Glenn Harmon is now a head of story at a place called Skydance that is I think it's owned by Paramount. I'm trying to think, but they're building up some good stories. Anyway. There's a lot of good coming out of it. It takes some investment. After 10, 15 years of time of having the program, we finally have people coming out of the program who are really making a high influence in the industry. And so we do want people to have a positive influence, but there's a lot more than that going on. We have people who are doing graphics and animation for the church. You have to do Book of Mormon films, and just all over the place. It's hard to find a movie out there anymore that doesn't have one of our alumni in the credits, which is kind of neat. So that's where that's going. We have to be careful not to get too comfortable, obviously, but we try real hard to continue. Each new group of students, we're starting over, trying to teach some of these principles, but it's been totally worth it to do that. So another question that we get is just, how does our program work? It's an undergraduate program. It starts in the sophomore year. They take some foundational classes. The junior year, they take a few more foundational classes, but then they middle junior year, they start making a film. In fact, last night, the current junior class just pitched out a film idea, chose it, voted on it, and they're off and running now. They'll be working on that for the next year. So they work on a capstone project. So I want to talk a little more about the capstone projects. And like I say, if you have questions that kind of veer off from this, you're welcome to ask. A big part of this is that we don't necessarily like to handhold. It is kind of more like a master's degree. I mean, you all are probably used to this, where here's a problem, or find a problem, or we have a problem and solve it, and you're like, well, I don't know how to solve it, and we're like, well, we don't know how to solve it either. That's in you. And we certainly, you're like, well, what do faculty do then? Well, we certainly mentor, give guidance and principles and all that kind of thing, but we don't do a lot of hand-holding. We just try to guide people in the direction so that people can bring their strengths to the table. And it's all students working on these projects. And so a big part of that is the fact that they spend a good chunk of their time in the program working on a capstone project. So this is where we really have the students focus in. It's essentially the whole senior class works on one film. Now, like I said, we have it divided. A good chunk of them will work on a film. A good chunk of them will work on a game. Some of them work on both, because some of them are like, I want to be able to build characters and texture characters. We'll build it for the film project. And then the two projects are offset. So when you're done with the film project, you can go and do that same skill on the game project and just get it broad. So there is still some breadth in this, but they can really dive deeper into the knowledge of some of the skills that they want to do. So they learn how to work as a team. We actually have officially set up a program in the computer science department and a program, the animation program, is two official programs. They work together. And companies, every time we tell companies that, they go crazy. They're like, what, artists and computer scientists are talking to each other? That's like, it is two different languages. But they learn to do these kind of things, and that's what makes people go crazy, that you're combining like different skills and collaborating. And we've also gotten involved with music, media arts, this department, and had a lot of fun, good success from people who've been passionate about these things and just come and worked on some of this stuff. Yeah, solving hard problems. So here's another thing is, whenever you're diving deep, something that we've really found out is that if you're solving hard problems, that's what people are really interested in. What do you bring to the table? You don't want to just start from scratch and invent everything from scratch, but essentially if they just keep the eye on the experience that they're doing. Like, we want, in this game, they're like, we want to make a game where we have just two music characters. It's a fighting game, and they're kind of going at each other, but it's supposed to be a little bit of a performance. You actually have to hit on the beat and stuff. And essentially, all they made was this background, a stage, and two characters, and they spent a year doing that. But they really focused in on how do we polish this, and how do we center everything about a core experience. And so that's another thing. And as you try to fit it to a core experience, you're going to run into some hard problems. If you just try to come up with hard problems for hard problems' sake, maybe that's not always necessarily as effective as doing it under a core experience. Yeah.
I have a couple questions. One
Mike.
One is related to scope. Like, one of the challenges I think we have oftentimes with major projects, especially hard real-world projects, is helping students know how to scope those in a way that's doable within a particular time frame. So I'm interested in hearing how you help them with that, especially the quality of and the enormous amount of effort that goes into these. The other question I'm just curious about is, we hear so much about the success and the awesome awards and all of the good things that are happening in the animation program. I'm wondering if you could tell us a story of a failure that's happened within the program and what you learned from that.
Okay, thanks. for the second question, we just hit the animate button, so I don't know that there's a lot of difficulties. So, no, I'm just kidding. So, oh yeah, I mean, you spend 6 months running into failures and then you finally figure stuff out. So yeah, I'll try to think of something. As far as scope goes, how do you scope things down? I think you just kind of learn over the years. You learn from each project what works and what doesn't, and then even the year-to-year thing has been an iterative process. But we can tell people, like with the game, like do one stage, because if you look at any game if you look at the real world, here's a game that someone made, and it has 20 different levels or 20 different stages, you probably have a team of 150 people working on that. And here we have 15 people, and you're still learning the process. So when we first talked to the game industry, is like, what are you looking for? What are some things that we can be integrating into our experiences? They said the most critical thing is that they're making games, but that they make a slice of a game, a small slice of a game. We just care more that something works well than that it's like this big thing. Yeah, because I've never had something be too small of scope.
So they don't care as much about the story in the game as they don't care as much about the story in the game as the production?
Yes,
part?
well, they care about the story, but in a game, it's more just about what experience you want to create for someone, and you can create that. Like, here it's a matter of like, can you hit to the beat, and it feels almost like you're making music as you're playing. That's the experience.
Right.
You don't need 100 characters to build that experience. So the question is, it's back to that idea of like, we have a kind of a high-level vision of what this should be, and then we make sure everything's in that vision. That's actually why I throw up the program goals. We actually work the program the same way. Here's our program goals. Is everything kind of fitting in that? And let's not necessarily make it huger than what's necessary to make that work. Yeah. So that's the scoping. And then your other question was about failures. I don't know. Talk to Garrett for a while. That's a longer question.
I mean, have you ever had a group, for example, a whole cohort that has they've committed to do something, and by the end of their time, it just is not functional?
I think at one point we won like 6 or 7 student Emmys, and again, the Emmys are kind of one of the bigger, more prominent, well-known things. And then we had a project that didn't even, they couldn't even finish the project. Like, each week, it was a film project, they create a story. And again, the scoping wise, we keep our stories about 45 minutes. We try to anyway. You'll see that they usually blow. But they would make a story, we'd give them some feedback, they'd come back the next week with a completely new story, like kind of the same idea, and they fixed everything except the feedback. And we're like, well, like you got rid of all the good stuff and kept the stuff that wasn't working, and on and on and on. And so there is certainly like the problem of how do we give high-level feedback and help them understand how to process that. And most teams actually eventually get it after a while. We've had teams that didn't, and their film actually didn't even finish.
So I guess the stakes are a little bit lower because you don't have external clients, right? I mean, they're submitting these, but if a cohort fails,
yeah,
they fail. I mean, they just can't submit something
yeah.
to the.
That's right.
To the.
It's really their goal to make something that can get them good opportunities. And not just like, I made some cool stuff, because you can make some cool stuff on your own, but I learned how to deal with other people. So they know that the soft skills that they learn from these things really pay a lot to getting to where they want to be. And they've seen that's the way that previous people have got success, and that's been very consistent success. So, but we can't make anybody be successful, of course.
Hey, Seth, we have a question from the chat.
Okay.
Brenton says he's curious about how many hours per week juniors and seniors are spending on the projects.
Depends. It could be 3 to 4 hours a week. It could be 15 to 20 hours a week. We do try to scope it. The time that they work on is about a year. We try to scope it small enough so that it's doable within the year without anyone killing themselves and being able to pass all their other classes. But some really just dive in and own it. Some kind of just dabble. It just depends on the purpose of it. But that's another consistent thing. The people who dabble, like, I just want to be exposed to making games. They have a real, one of our professors says they often end up selling shoes at Sears just because you have to dive in pretty deep. But it's like anything, like if you have a love for something, if it's music or dance or making video games or films or whatever it is, and you just kind of own it and love it and dive into it, you're going to get opportunities. It's those people that we have to tell, whoa, okay, make sure to pass your other classes, like do well in your other classes, and but by just owning and diving in, they're the ones generally having the more success. So that's more or less the time limit. It's hard to put a time limit on it though, because everyone's different. We do, for those who are really diving in, we do try to get funds so that we can hire some of them on to take care of some of the extraneous stuff that's just involved with making a film and such. Okay, let me see what time it is. I want to show, is it okay if I show one of the films?
Yeah.
I want to show you one of our recently completed films here. This one, let's see if I can find it. This is called Death and Delilah. It is, we just finished this one. It's not even available to the public yet. We just finished it. We submitted it to the Emmys. So you get kind of we're one of the first people to get to see this thing. But here's the idea of a film and what that ends up being like. That didn't come. You can tell it's pretty good. Okay. That didn't like what I did. There it is.
You've got mail. You've got mail. Here at Riversticks Enterprise, we strive to help you reap the benefits of your hard work. Are you dreaming of a new office? Then here's the chance of an after lifetime. Fantastic! As always, we send you the client's location and file. Then using our patented Riversticks Enterprise site, warp your way over to the human world. All you have to do is take care of one sweet old lady. And easy peasy, aorta squeezy, you have yourself a new office. Click here for your assignment.
latest film, and that was just kind of fun and goofy. There was a little bit of this thing. It was essentially like, what if the Grim Reaper was just this corporate guy? But also, sometimes your failures can lead to successes as well. He gets his desk that he wanted in the end, and so it's fun when you get to play around with these things. But also, it's interesting. One of the reasons why we're a small program at BYU, one reason they keep us around is just because it's interesting where these sort of projects reach. They've reached a lot of places and countries even that the church may not reach, or BYU may not be reaching. I mean, all these different programs reach in many, many different places, and BYU loves that, and it has a positive effect. We've reached places in China and such. So just briefly, the design process, again, is collaborative. You start with a theme, high-level theme, you make sure you stick with that theme, and then, we had a few people drawing, what's the corporate Grim Reaper like? Well, that feels corporate, but not grim enough. Okay, here's this other guy. They actually went through quite a few iterations to get to our death character. Same with Delilah. She's like this sweet old lady, but she's actually kind of, what's the word for it? Anyway, the character that you saw, they went through iterations for that, and everyone kind of feeds off each other. That's the fun thing about being on the team. The style that they had for death and that kind of perspective they brought that into Delilah. So that was one of the final designs. And then again, it's about solving hard problems. Like, that's the style that we want, but it needs to be a three-dimensional film. Usually you model things exactly how you see them, but how do you make it so that her eyes are on one side of her nose, but it looks right, and it's in 3D? And then how do you take that, and like, how do you color it? How do you light it so it still feels three-dimensional, but her nose is still on, her eyes are, one side of her nose, sort of deal. And then, okay, we're doing this for the characters. We have to do this for the sets. And so they did all these wonky designs with the sets. Can we model all those? So they tried it out and just gray models, and then, will that look good in 3D and lit and everything? I'll skip that. So here we actually have some of the models. The weird thing is they had to build it all wonky. So if you look at it from one angle, it looks right, but it's still wonky, and they had to make it so that the light, so that the side was darker than the top, so that it still felt three-dimensional. It actually wasn't a super easy problem, because this is what it looks like. Let's see if I can play this. So that's making sure the light moves across it, but that's what the car is built like. So if you look at it from any other angle, it's this weird looking thing. But same with this table. Like, the table's not flat, it's angled to be, so how do you make the shadows still fall across it and stuff? Like, they run into all sorts of interesting problems, and that's part of that, what we love about that search for excellence is, when you run into a problem. But you take the problems one at a time. Here's another just video. So once we got all the models and stuff working, you build these objects one at a time, and then there were places in the video where they're like, we got to stack these up. So it's like, well, how do we get them stacked up and it doesn't look confusing, and we get the perspectives right, and they're not all gray, and how do we light it? And then ultimately from there, back to this. Oops. So you feel that. Anyway, just to give you some sense of the types of problems we're solving. We've made games, like I said, just to give you a few examples. Here's that Beatboxers game. The students actually come up with a project idea. So it's what they call a fighter game. but again, you're just trying to hit to the beat. So it's a game where you smack each other around. I mean, it's not the most profound games. Some end up being more profound than others, but it's fun just to let them kind of play around with it. And what if this was more a performance than just a fighting game? And so again, how game design, I mean, it's related to any design problem. That's a whole long other, presentation of how you do designs. But the art design process is the same. Just thinking through what kind of characters might best fit this world, make the person feel like they're in this world, and then you take one problem at a time. Solve the critical problem, the most highest priority problem. Once you have that, then you find out what the next set of problems are. You solve those, and then you just keep going until you get it all worked out. Those were some of the final designs. Someone else had to figure out how to do a bunch of crowds. So here's there were these wonky like speaker things. Actually, one of the characters was called Speakachu because it was a speaker, but he looked like the speaker thing. But they're like, you have to be able to compute all this stuff in 1/60th of a second, plus everything else that's going on. So that was a problem to solve. How do we get some crowds? We want to be able to go through the crowds. How do we get them in 1/60th of a second? Another game that we had called Avasti. This was actually kind of fun because what if you're an ant and you're in this you're a pirate ant, you're a pyrant, I guess you could call it. But what's it like to be a pirate in the undergrowth? It was kind of a fun thing to solve. So that was another game for bigger ants. So anyway, these are just some of the things that we're working on. I'm curious. I could do questions. We could watch one more film. It's about 8 minutes long. So is there a preference to questions or one more film? I can show Grendel, but.
Film?
Okay.